Hi, and welcome to the KindlED Podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves.
Hello, and welcome to the KindlED Podcast. Adriane, good to see you. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
So good. Can you tell us who we're talking to today?
Of course. So today we have the pleasure of chatting with Andee Martineau. Andee is a mom of 6, a reformed yeller, a best-selling author, and the creator of KindlED Parenting, a breakthrough parenting framework that leverages connection as the primary mechanism for influencing children. Andee has been able to help thousands of parents learn the parenting methodology that gets their kids to want to listen. Her goal is to help parents stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what their kids are doing and build strong relationships through every stage and phase.
Amazing. I'm so excited. Let's jump into our conversation. So tell us your story. Who are you? What do you do? Why are you so passionate about your work? What's your big why?
You could say it all started with what I now call the great baby powder blizzard of 2006. It was this moment in time where I had many children, many small children. I think I had 5 at the time. And I was busy doing my things. Everything seemed great. I'd actually gotten the dishes done and the clothes were folded. And this is one of those days where you remember all the details. You know, you have those moments where everything is just really crystal clear. So I remember all of that and thinking, I'm winning. This is fabulous. Everything's going great. And then noticed how quiet it had been. The kids had been quiet for quite a long time. So I realized that I probably needed to go check on them, but I was a little bit apprehensive because silence usually isn't a great indicator that something was happening, at least not at that time. It usually meant they had gotten into a lot of things. So I peeked into the playroom, which was off the kitchen, and what I saw really, it was amazing. They had taken a Costco-sized bottle of baby powder, and later to find out, I've talked to my 20-year-old now about this, and she's like, Mom, we also had flour too. We had gotten the flour bin in there as well. I'm like, well, that explains a lot. So it's a baby powder, flour, blizzard, and the whole playroom was covered. We had just saved and scrimped for a GameCube. I don't know if you remember, I'm older than both of you guys, but GameCube, we had, which is funny because later we didn't even do electronics, but at the time that was a big deal, and we had gotten it for Christmas. It was ruined. Everything was ruined. Flour everywhere, and I completely lost it. My kids were so excited to show me their creation, and all I saw was the disaster and the hours of cleanup, and I was livid. I started yelling. I started telling them, all the things that they were not going to have now, and just such a victim mentality in it. And then I had this moment. I was looking at he was about 3 or 4 at the time, and he's now 19. So it's so crazy to think how long ago this was. But I remember his face just went from excitement to crestfallen, crying. And I saw that I was being so childish and so I just had lost sight of what really mattered, and that I was being this person I couldn't respect. Really, I looked at myself and I can't respect the person I'm being right now to my kids. And I was expecting something of them, self-control and kindness and, all of these things that I was not exhibiting in the moment, and was so angry. But I was able to have this moment of clarity where almost where you step away or zoom out, and I could see the reality of what had happened and was able to pivot. And that's why this is such a powerful memory for me, because it was one of the first times in the middle of, this heated storm, I pivoted and said, okay, this doesn't need to be a big deal. I can just relax. I kneeled down, and I didn't have any skills at this time to know what I was doing. And just intuitively followed just what felt good, kneeled down, looked them in the eyes. Actually have a picture of the event that we still reference sometimes just to kind of remember this moment in time. And it was one of those pivotal moments that helped me see that I was capable of handling things differently, but I didn't have the tools or the awareness to, and it really set me on this quest I've got to figure out how to be able to replicate that anytime I want, to be able to pull that awareness and that kindness and that compassion and that patience in and deal with anything that comes up with my kids in a way that is, kind and compassionate, really from this higher self that I knew I could do, but I was constantly falling into these old patterns and trying to correct with, harsh discipline or lectures or consequences / punishments. And so, yeah, this was a pivotal moment. So when I think about the journey I've been on since, it really kind of all started with this moment of awareness that there's ability to pivot, because my kids were so forgiving in the moment. They just flipped right out of it. And we ended up cleaning it up really easily and having a beautiful rest of our day. So all of this evidence of, there's a better way. I just have to figure out what in the world happened that allowed me to step into that so I can do it again and again and again. And so my big why at the moment was figure this out. Now it's, oh my gosh, I figured out how to do it. And I want to, help everyone who wants to learn how to parent from a place of connection, not correction, how to do that. So that's my big why and kind of what has led me to where I am today.
That is such an incredible story and moment. And I've had many similar moments moments of chaos. I wouldn't say as many moments of success as I'd like, right? In those times, I feel like there's such a hope in that story, right? That we can all learn to manage our own thoughts and emotions and reactions and interactions in a more connective way. And I love how you use the term like your higher self. Sometimes we're not always able to be our best, most like our highest selves. And I think it's important to just acknowledge that. And Andee, something that I've learned a lot from you is that being there all of the time and then beating ourselves up when we can't be there all the time is not productive. Can you talk a little bit about that?
This is one of the biggest stumbling blocks, I think, for a lot of parents who, especially after we have a moment where we do things differently and then we regress back, where we are so hard on ourselves. I mean, that's the typical dialogue, is the way we improve is to really get critical and to not for everyone. I shouldn't clump everybody into that, but it tends to be that a lot of moms that have really high intentions for themselves tend to be pretty hard on themselves when they can't sustain this trajectory of constant growth. I'm a big proponent that we're always doing the best we can in each moment. And I had to learn this the hard way by doing years and years of using the baby powder blizzard moment, the failure to success moment, as ammunition against myself. Why can't I do that again? I should know better. I did it. All of us, it takes time to really be okay with our flaws and our mess ups, and to really step in to the belief that if I could have done better, I would have done better in the moment. Now, that doesn't take us away from learning from every experience, because there is so much value in getting curious about, okay, why didn't I calm down, or why did I resort to that again? But coming from a place of curiosity and really acceptance, that's the doorway to change and shifting. And there's science to prove it. So that was very helpful for my brain to see that when we do beat ourselves up, or even are just excessively hard on ourselves, that the nervous system is triggered. And when we're in a triggered nervous system place, fight, flight, fawn, freeze, the higher thinking part of our brain, that prefrontal cortex, it's inhibited. And we aren't able to go to the places that we want to go to that would help us be the calmest, kindest version of ourselves when our kids are upset, or even when we're evaluating a situation and saying, okay, what did I do? What do I wish I had done differently so I can make a plan for next time? When we are hard on ourselves and we're attacking ourselves, or whatever that is, for, irritated with ourselves, whatever level of emotion, whether it's intense or even just mild, when we are not able to just love and accept ourselves for who we were in the moment and recognize that, then change just doesn't happen, because it scientifically really, the neural pathways can't change when we're in a state of protection, trying to protect ourselves from some perceived threat, which is ourselves attacking ourselves. So it's really beautiful to just be able to accept that.
Something you just said reminded me of a book I just read about the polyvagal theory, and it's Deborah M. Wilson. And she talks about how replaying those moments, though, are really important after the fact, and then replay as if you were in a ventral state, as if you were in a calm state, because then that primes your nervous system and your mind to know what to do when the next time that happens. And that story is hilarious because I love how you said the Costco size tub of baby powder, because when my niece was, I think she was 2 or 3, and we were visiting in Pennsylvania, and she struggled with nap time. She was in her room for a good 2.5, 3 hours. And my sister-in-law got so much cleaning done and was just so proud of herself that her daughter was sleeping, is what she thought. And we walked in their room, and she had a Costco-sized tub of not baby powder, but Desitin, and covered her entire body from head to toe, her entire bedspread, her walls. I mean, she had a good 2.5 hours with this tub. And we know now, she's neurodivergent and she's very sensory seeking. So this was so good for her nervous system, but not so good for the carpet. I mean, they had to rip out the carpet. It was a disaster. And we couldn't even get it out of her hair. It was in every crevice of her body. But thinking back and how, I feel like my sister-in-law more went into freeze mode instead of fight mode, which was probably more beneficial, for their relationship and what happened. But then, and then we learn as parents, we need to see those moments as maybe not something oh, how they defied me, but look at it and see it from what the child and what need the child was fulfilling. I think that's really powerful too.
Can we just dig into that really quick? Because I think that's a situation, like a mental state that a lot of people sit in. It's they see their job, we see our job as the enforcer, or this the person that needs to command respect or compliance. And how can we move, and why should we think about moving past that?
Ooh, that's such a good question, Kaity. I love that. Thank you for broaching the question, because gosh, that's we just don't think about that. We go into feeling the responsibility of what our kids are doing, as such a heavy burden that we might be carrying, or a reflection of our ability. But I think when we can start to separate that their behavior is information, it's just telling, the Desitin story, the baby powder story. I'm sure, Kaity, you could pull out a story, right? Or where it's similar, where you have this moment where your brain is just so confused by what just happened. You can't even believe that the kids just did this thing. And a lot of times the reason I think we go into that enforcer mode is because we have a story and a meaning about what that behavior means about our child and about us. And so the better we get at questioning that, is that even true? What does their behavior mean? And is it a reflection of me? And maybe there is something we want to take from it and say, okay, I can show up better in this way for my kids. I have something to learn. But that's about how I can serve them versus I need to fix them, or I need to change this so that I can feel better. So deciding what the story means, and then really getting clear of, when I go into that enforcer state, what is the emotion in my body that I'm feeling? Typically, a lot of times we step into the enforcer state, it's because I'm so uncomfortable. We're not always aware of this, but if we go back and inspect, I'm so uncomfortable that my kids are fighting. It makes me, maybe there's a story from our past where we got in trouble, or maybe we just don't like conflict and we really wanted to end, or whatever the reason is. And we, without being more conscious, we want them to stop, because unconsciously we know that will help us feel better. And so we need to enforce that to help us resolve our own issues, our own feelings, our own, lack of worthiness. Because if they're fighting, another story is I'm not doing a good job as a parent or whatever. And so I think just understanding the motivation between why do I go into enforcer mode is so powerful. And really, sometimes that alone stops us in our tracks and helps parents start to pivot, or anybody who's working with kids start to pivot. So they realize, oh, this is about my story. That's why I want to go into enforcer mode. It has nothing to do with my kids.
A phrase you said that stuck out to me was when I was in trouble, because in our family, because we're parenting in this more conscious way and understanding what our story is, our narrative, and understanding, our kids' behavior there's reasons behind it, but we don't even use that phrase. Our kids don't even get in trouble. But how many of us, when we were growing up, got in trouble for all of these things? So it makes sense of why we would behave in these ways. And there's so much undoing, it feels like. Something I struggle with is, especially when I am doing parent coaching and working with clients, is I'm always saying, well, there's no perfection. We're not looking for a perfect way of parenting. But then also there like this right or wrong, or basically like how would you define like long-term success in parenting, or even in educating or coaching kids?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very different than what I thought when I first started parenting, or probably what my parents thought. I think that's, to your point of how things change when you step into a more conscious, connected parenting framework. So one of the things that comes to mind is that we start to realize that we don't need to fix the kids. I love saying we don't need to fix the kids. We just need to love and connect them. And then the crazy thing is the fixing just seems to start taking care of itself when everyone is approaching it from a different perspective. It's also that the things that when we have the long-term success would be when we start to notice that the things that bother us or used to bother us a lot either bother us less, or we're able to recover faster. If we notice that they bother us again, we're more aware of it. So to your point, there's no such thing as perfection. I think as soon as maybe we master showing up a certain way for one of our kids, there's going to be another child or another thing that hits us that's new, that we have to, I have to wrap my brain around this. So it's more about figuring out when I am triggered or dysregulated as a parent, that I'm getting better and better at recognizing that I am and recovering from it. We're all imperfect humans, developing. And so I think just the more we honor and respect that about ourselves, and we can respect that about our kids, like that's success to me. The right now, I mean, it's funny when you talk about success, because the house being messy, with my lead-in story of the baby powder blizzard, that was a big deal. That's been a big deal to me. I like a clean house. I think a lot of, people with kids, we like a clean house, and we've maybe used that in inappropriate ways to measure, our success or whatever. I was just thinking as we were talking about this, my daughter just moved back from college. So all of her things descended with her on our house. And so it's this big, huge mess. And it happened on the weekend and I was out of town. So I got in on Monday and it's just been a busy week. And success for me is being okay with the mess, knowing that we're going to get to it. And I don't need to be frustrated about it the whole week or be agitated about it, but that wouldn't have been available to me 15 years ago. I would have needed that clean so I could feel good, instead of saying I feel good and the house can still be messy, or I can feel good and the kids can be struggling with this thing. And I think that's a huge success as we lean more and more into conscious parenting, connective parenting, really understanding, that this is a process and we're all learning, and we don't have to have perfectly behaved children or even perfectly behaved adults to, have success.
So in your book, you talk a lot about like maintaining long-term influence instead of like short-term compliance. And I love that idea. Can you go into that?
Long-term influence is I think that's what all of us intuitively want. We want our kids to be wanting us to give them an opinion when they're in college. Like that's our goal, right? Or when they're, when they're grown and they don't have to call us. We want them to me at least, having impact and influence long-term means they still want my advice. They might not follow it, but they're curious about what I would have to say. They're genuinely interested. And so to create this impact, this influence, for the long game, not just, to get them to clean their room today. It really is all about relationships. It's all about trust and safety and connection, and focusing on that, and that being more important, prioritizing that above maybe what our brain is, our reflexive, brain is saying, no, the most important thing is to clean the room, or the most important thing is that they get an A, that they turn in their, homework or get an A in the class or whatever it is, do their chore, to remember, okay, am I sacrificing this little short-term win, for my long-term goal of really having deep, meaningful relationships that last.
If you haven't really dug into this before, this like connective method of interacting with kids, it feels like we're just getting rid of standards, or like we're just trying to blur the line between right and wrong and not hold kids accountable and not teach them responsibility. And so can you kind of outline, which is not what we're saying, there's plenty of room for, I think in your book you call them loving limits and correction and guidance. So talk about the balance between that and how you can still do all those things in a connective, respectful way where you don't lose that long-term influence.
Yeah, this is a pretty common question. I was coaching one of my one-on-one clients, and his fear was this exact thing. How am I going to maintain any type of control if I don't have consequences? So it's a big deal. And to be honest, when we show up and use what I call connect method parenting, it's anything but passive. It's it's the limit. And the way I like to explain limits is, if you were playing soccer, right? A 5-year-old was playing soccer and the coach was trying to teach them the rules and they kept touching the ball with their hands. The way the coach would set a limit would be to, hey, we can't touch the ball with our hands, right? If we touch the ball with our hands, then the other team gets the ball, right? And you would just keep reminding the 5-year-old as many times as you needed. You wouldn't be mad at them for being, really, disrespectful of you if they didn't get it, because it's a 5-year-old, and it might take them some time. So it's that same concept of, hey, I'm just going to state the expectation or the rule or the boundary. I like the word limit just because it's a word a lot of us haven't used for that kind of thing. And sometimes it's nice to pull out a different word so we don't have the connection to something that maybe brings another, like lecturing or, all these other things tied to it. So being able to have the confidence to state the limit and to realize, and this is a great thing I want to just bring up really quickly because this is a confusion, that consequences, typically when we use the word consequences, it's not always, but a lot of parents come in using them at almost synonymous with punishment, because they're to teach a lesson, usually is how we're thinking. I need to give them a consequence so they learn this lesson so they don't get away with it, and they, we don't lose control of everything or have, no limits and no boundaries. So when we use a consequence or a punishment, we think it's teaching this lesson, right? We think it's going to like stop the behavior for good, but it's not teaching that intuitively in the way we think. It might be teaching them, okay, here's a hoop I need to jump through so that I can keep watching TV, or here's something I need to do, or I'm going to lose this privilege, or, or I want to get this thing. That's what it's teaching them. But what we really want to teach them is to be in a place where they want to listen to us. They want to hear what we have to say. They respect us. And, obviously as they get older, this becomes more available to them. When they're little, they're not able to maybe expand the thought like that. But the reality of, hey, what if the limit, and doing it in a connective way, just reminding them of the rule and being firm. The coach doesn't need to punish the child if they touch the soccer ball. They just need to state the rule, and then a natural, if they do that, there'll be a cause and effect in the game, and the child will learn that, and naturally they'll start to self-govern themselves, and they'll want to obey the rule because it's advantageous to their team and to the game. And in the same way, that's what we want our kids to do, to be able to recognize for themselves, not because they're afraid of what they will not have, or just they're going for this, reward, but we really want them to be able to identify, oh, mom has my best interest in heart. She's setting this limit. There are rules in our house. And there may even be things where you say, okay, the limit is we need to clean the room before we turn on a show or something. But that doesn't have to be a negative. The TV doesn't need to be motivating them to do the room. You don't have to take something away to get them to do the room. You can just set this clear limit. It's very clean, and it's consistent. And what it allows them to do is not to feel the control of us trying to manipulate them from exterior to get them to do something they actually find they get to have a choice in it, and then we get to hold it firm, but not from a place of frustration. So it's a really beautiful dance, and it works so beautifully, but it has to be done from a place of a clean place. I call it, from a place where you truly believe that it's going to work, and that you believe that your child really, at his highest self, really wants to be successful. He wants to make good choices. He has a good heart. All of those things, we come with that mindset too, and that helps. When we believe in our child, when we set the limits.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say a lot is that it really matters your internal state, like your thoughts and your feelings, and like your words maybe matter less than how you're feeling inside when you say the words. You can still be firm, I think is the word that you used. But when you have, in my experience at least, when you have your thoughts and feelings organized and you're like able to access your higher self, or like the best version of yourself, you can do that in a way that doesn't like cause this rift, right? The child can still feel that you still believe all of those, that they are good in their heart, and that they want good things, and that they didn't mean, you're believing in their best intentions. And then that seems to make them more receptive to that correction or guidance that you're giving them in that moment, instead of, you are making me feel very scared right now with your yelling, so I'm going to go into shutdown mode, and I'm going to be completely unavailable to your influence now and in the future too. I'm kind of separating. I have to separate your influence from my like internal processing, because it feels dangerous and scary to me to let you in here, right? And so when we can manage ourselves internally, that allows this connection to actually like grow and grow. As we show up for our kids in this way, they trust us more and more, and they are open to our influence more and more, is what I found.
And it's a lot of times subconscious. It's not even conscious awareness. And our regulated nervous system then helps co-regulate and builds and primes their nervous system as well. And Andee, I would love to talk about, so you talk about connection and why it's important in our long-term goals, but it's like, why? How does this like prime the brain? Do you have any research on that? And then also I would love to touch a little bit on disconnection. Is disconnection bad, or why is disconnection not most ideal whenever we are working with children?
Yeah, great question. And I want to just really quickly make one fast comment to what we were talking about before, about the need to help our kids' nervous systems feel safe. Our kids are really programmed to have deep connections with they need an adult to take care of them, for them to survive. And so another reason it leads into what you're talking about too, what we're talking about, the question you just posed, is that when we are able to recognize the need that our children have to be connected to us, and that gives us the ability to understand that when we are using yelling, or the things that we might, let's just do consequences, because that's may even seem like a step down from yelling. But when we go into using consequences or rewards to try to change behavior, they might comply because they need the relationship with us so much. Like their safety, their nervous system is wired to say, if I am disconnected from this adult, I might not survive. So I might need to go through these hoops so that I survive. And that won't bring on the best in them, and that intrinsic motivation that we were talking about won't really be able to ignite, because they're going to be in a constant state of their nervous system is going to be in some constant state of triggering. So I just wanted to point on that, because sometimes, parents will say, well, it works really well when I say, okay, if you guys aren't going to leave, I'll just leave the room, or I'll just take that away. And it's the reaction, the reason we get the kids to react so well to that is because they're so afraid of losing that relationship with us.
I always ask too, I'm like, what does it works even mean? Like it's working to do what? To have control over. So I think that's really important to point out as well.
Yeah.
So why is disconnection bad, or what happens when there is disconnection?
Yeah. Yeah. The disconnection creates alarm in our children, right? So it puts them into a fight or flight state because they need that relationship more than we do. Their survival depends on it, even though it's subconscious. They're not intentionally, consciously thinking that. And when we're in a fight or flight mode, we're not able to have our highest thinking, our creativity. We're certainly not feeling safe or trusting anything that would create that solid, safe bond. And so recognizing, Neufeld calls it bridging. He's Dr. Gordon Neufeld. He's one of my favorite developmental psychologists. He says, this idea of bridging and always reminding the child, because even if we're doing a loving limit that's super connected and we're in a really good place, our child still might feel alarm of, oh my gosh, mom's not happy with how I did this, even if we're doing it in such a kind way, right? And so helping them by even just saying, me giving you this feedback might be hard for you to hear, but I love you. You're doing such a good job. And then talking about something you're going to spend some time doing together later to just reassure them we are good. I want to spend time with you. And just helping them know that my love and connection to you is not linked at all to your behavior. It's that's not where that is, stemming from, so that they can remember that. Sometimes we need to remember that too, okay, that's right. I'm not going to be letting this get in the way of how I feel or think about this child. um, and allowing the connection to create that safety, because safety in our nervous systems, in our bodies, for us and for our kids, is the solution. It really is the solution. If we can all have that safety in our bodies, and then we start thinking better and we can connect and we can bond. And for our children, they really physiologically are created to regulate with us. They need our mirror neurons to help them calm down. They really, as children, are not equipped, or it's not the ideal situation for them to have to figure out how to regulate their emotions, how to problem solve situations. They truly, honestly need us. And sometimes I've fallen into this, they start walking and talking and having these conversations and we think they're adults, instead of realizing they're not adults yet. They need us. And so being willing to stay connected even when they're at their worst, to realize, oh, they need me to come reassure them. I had this experience with my daughter where she was so upset and she had so many stories about herself. She kept saying, I'm not nice, I keep exploding, I'm just not a good person. And she was caught in that loop, and I had to come in and continue to remind her, you are a good person, and this is just something, hormones, you're overwhelmed. It's okay that this emotion is inside of you right now. It is not you. You are not your behavior. You are not defined by your emotions. And I almost had to be that voice of reason for her, because she wasn't she's getting older, so she's getting better at it. But even as adults, sometimes it's so beautiful to have someone come in and just remind us, you are not your emotions. You are not your behavior. You are so much more than that. And sometimes we all slip and fall and we get triggered, and that's okay. But, in the hierarchy of needs, security and safety are foundational. And so if we're disconnected from ourselves and we're triggered, which happens, not a problem. Just, if we try to notice that as parents or as caregivers and get into a regulated state. If our kids are that way, trying to show up for them so that they can feel that safety and security. And, so many studies have been done to just show the impact and effect of what happens when our children, are feeling connected, and when they have a caregiver that is able to practice regulating themselves so they can care for them as well.
So I'm going to interpret some of our potential listeners' thoughts right now and say, Andee, it sounds like you want us to just coddle the kids and just make sure they always feel safe and that they're never challenged or stressed, and just protect them, let them live in a bubble. How do you respond to that?
I love it. It's such a good question, because that's what I used to think too. That was the hesitation for me adopting this mindset of and framework of parenting was, oh my gosh, you're just going to enable them to do all the bad behavior. But really what we're doing is we're helping them create safety in their body so that they can have the best possible opportunity to make really good choices from a place of safety. So I actually say I believe that what I'm able to teach and execute with my kids and have these high, mile markers we're going towards as far as all the things they're wanting to accomplish in their life is greater when I'm coming from a place of we're going to stay connected, because when we stay connected, I'm not enabling, I'm actually impacting them more. They want to listen to me more. I used to think of it like this. If I say my husband and I had made an agreement on what I was supposed to do that day, and I didn't get it done. I decided to watch TV all day. And he comes in and he says, "Did you get these XYZ done?" And I said, "No, I just decided to watch TV today." And he's like, "Okay, fine. We got to taking away the keys. You can't drive anymore. You don't get to have the grocery money. I'm taking away your debit card." I would not want to listen to him. I'd be like, "What? You don't even know why I decided to watch TV all day. You're not even giving me the benefit of the doubt that maybe I had a really good reason, or maybe I didn't. Maybe I was just totally lazy and just, completely opted out on what I said I would do." But either way, if you want to have impact or influence on me, come understand me first. Help me see that you truly are on my team and you want what's best for me, and help me make a new plan. And I feel that's the power of being connected and always giving my child the benefit of the doubt. Like, there was a good reason. It may not be a reason we want to keep, but there was a reason their nervous system thought that was a good idea. I'm going to always believe in their best, understand it, and then from that place, my child can relax and hear me. And especially if they've just made a poor choice, and when I can come in and say, "Okay, like, I'm sure there was a reason why you thought that was a good choice. And do you want to keep doing it?" And a lot of times it's really fast for them to say, "No, that wouldn't, that's not what I want to keep doing." But they need to make that decision, and if you're saying, well, it's a 5-year-old and they might not, have that cognitive ability, coming still in and with the belief of there's a reason their immature nervous system decided to hit their sister. I'm not going to keep letting her hit her sister, but I'm coming and believing that that was the best she could do in that moment. So what does she need to be successful right now? Maybe she needs to stay by my side. Maybe she needs to, you know, have a little bit of quiet time on the table, so coloring something. How do I need to go in and help create this boundary and limit to keep everyone safe? Believing that if that's that was the best she could do in that moment, and if that's the best she can do in the moment, maybe she needs, and it's pretty low, maybe it's a 1 out of 10, then I need to come in and help create safety. Like she's not going to be in a place to be able to, whether it's my 5-year-old or my 13-year-old, if they're functioning at a not a great capacity that day, then they need a little help to get them to a place where they can increase the capacity. Because me saying, just like if my husband, like I was using the example, he comes in and he says, "Well, I'm taking away the keys," that's not going to increase my capacity. It's just going to put me into fight or flight. I'm actually going to be less capable of making a good decision. But if he comes in and he says, "Well, tell me about it. Why did you lay on the couch? And is something going on? Or do we need to," well, then I'm going to start relaxing and being open. My higher thinking is going to come on. I'm going to start to realize, oh, maybe I want to make a different decision yesterday or today for tomorrow, and so it allows everyone's potential, or not potential, it allows everyone's capacity to rise from a place of connection, from feeling that nothing's wrong with you. Let's just understand what caused you to show up this way right now in this moment.
What I hear you say too is basically we can look at behavior as a lagging skill. Like it's like, well, they haven't developed that skill yet, instead of something that we already have the expectations that they should already know how to do. And I mean, impulse control is something that develops over a very, very long time. And also, as you're talking, I'm thinking about how it makes sense of why there are so many dysregulated parents, because we didn't get this. We didn't get this regulation as a child. And these paradigms, they started somewhere, right? We didn't just think this up of, oh, a child should only, be seen and not heard. Like that's something that has been brought down from generation after generation. And so I always talk to clients about too, like, think about what you're doing here. Your children are 2 and 4. They have such underdeveloped brains. Just think about all the development they're going to get and be strong and knowing who they are, having these really incredible nervous systems that are primed to be able to handle situations and be able to handle other people's emotions, and they won't have to be sitting here doing parent coaching whenever they're adults, because it all starts somewhere. It totally makes sense of why we have these thoughts and these behaviors and these actions.
So, Andee, take us through how do we get started doing this work? What's the first step in understanding how we can master our own thoughts and feelings, trace the connection between thought and feeling and action for us, and help us get started?
Yeah, it starts with awareness. That's where it really starts, which is this conversation has been so beautiful, I think, because it's bringing up so much awareness about different things that we may or may not have considered before. So getting present and pausing long enough to have that awareness of what's happening, that's to me, that's step one. I have a process I called peace. And so P is for pause and get present. And then once we've slowed down, we've inspected a little bit, asked some questions. Maybe I love writing down. I call it a thought download. You write down what's on your brain, because getting it on paper sometimes makes it even more clear. It's less muddled than in our brain. And then it's really important to explore what we've been thinking and feeling. So looking at the situation in a more factual way. Here's the facts, which to me is no adjectives, just really trying to clean it up, which is extremely difficult because I want to say my kids were yelling. That's what my yelling to me is different than yelling to some other parent. So we couldn't all agree on that necessarily. So I love to say, can you tell me what they said? Or can you just say they said words? And part of that process too is neutralizing it. We have a lot of stories for a lot of different reasons of what yelling means. And so when I use the word yelling, my brain all of a sudden links to not okay, bad, disrespectful, right? I might have all of these stories about it. So when I just say my kids said words, it's a lot harder for my brain to attach it to all these stories. So, but I want to see it clearly too, instead of messy room, what does the room look like specifically? And then I can see from that situation, that situation that I've identified, what am I thinking? So I do want to know the unintentional meaning. This is a tricky thing. It has been a tricky thing for me to learn how to lean in to that thought that I have about it, especially the more aware I become. It was really painful to see, oh my gosh, I'm doing it again. I'm saying, the kids should do better, or they told me last night, this, that, or the other. And then they backed, they didn't, follow through on what they said. And I part of me realizes that's crazy and that they're kids. And then part of me is like, oh, but I still believe that. Part of me is still really holding on to that. So I love just looking at the thought, the meaning that I'm making about the situation. Also, the emotion that comes up when I'm believing that. I really want to honestly look at that unintentional, that unintentional thought, subconscious thought, you could call it, the emotion that comes up, all the things that I did, and the result that created for me. So I call it the steer, the situation, the thought, the emotion, the action, and the result. Really, all it's doing is taking all the components of something that happened in life and helping me just look at it without all the judgment, just allowing me to step into curiosity. It's so important to have the awareness. I like to think of it on a map. If I don't know where I am, it's really hard to use a map to figure out where I'm going. I have to see where I am, even if that's painful or embarrassing, or I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm still thinking that. The only way I change is or can use a map to navigate is to be clear on where I am. And so that's the power of looking at where we are and intentionally. And then for me, the third step, and it's the A in peace, is affirm. And that's really about reminding ourselves that there's a very, very good reason why our nervous system has created this unintentional way of showing up in this situation. Something happened. My body said, I can't take that anymore. That's too uncomfortable. My sympathetic nervous system, I like to say, had sympathy on me. So it created this story that I was more able to function under, even if it's dysfunctional. It felt safer. And so it's really important. I used to not understand this, but it's really, really important that we remind ourselves, we affirm ourselves. We can do this by breathing or meditating, or even just saying, oh, of course, part of me thinks that way. I'll say that a lot. Oh, of course, there was part of me that believed that I should yell or I should do that old thing. Sometimes I'm doing it right now, but putting my hand on my body where I'm feeling that tightness or the stress, praying, going for a walk, listening to music. Sometimes I would just lay on the ground because it was such a different, like on the carpet, not on my bed, just like on the carpet, somewhere different where my body would just be more aware and say, what are we doing? This isn't normal, because it allowed me to shift things. Being active though is really good. They've done so many studies that, just moving our body helps us get more in touch with our helps our nervous system calm down. So those are some of the things. And if anybody wants a great resource, Body Keeps the Score is such a good book for talking about the nervous system and why polyvagal theory. I love that too.
It's a hard read, but it's a really good read.
Yeah, it's worth it if you want to really understand, and if it's really powerful for you to understand the science, if that really helps things shift in your brain, then read it, or read The Body Keeps the Score, or you'll start seeing lots of other things. If you go to Amazon, you'll start suggesting other related books too. But just this awareness of, oh, my nervous system is doing a lot of things behind the scene. I need to be really kind so that I can see it and I can shift it. C is next, creating a new way of thinking. So it's really powerful to create the possibility of how I could respond next time something similar happens. So taking the same situation, what would I love to have thought about that? If I was like at my highest self, my most loving, compassionate version of myself, what would I want to believe about that happening with the kids fighting in the other room or the messy bedroom? And then that would help me feel what? So that's the emotion. And then what could I do? What would I have done differently? Or what will I be able to do differently in the future? Those are all those actions. And then what would that create? The result, connectedness and maybe more patience or more awareness or more curiosity or whatever that would be. And it's just so powerful to take yourself into this realm of possibility when you've really done the work to see where you honestly are, and then calm the nervous system down, create a new steer, and then just go execute on it and start playing around with it. And that's one of the best frameworks I've ever seen to help, like a practical framework to really go from real life situation. Let's get our nervous system on board. Let's create something new and then practice it. And then, you do it again, because it takes a little bit to get our nervous systems retrained, our subconscious brain. I can't remember the numbers now, but it's so much more powerful. I've heard it compared to like a speeding train, like one of those fast trains in, Japan or something, compared to, a hand pumped hand cart, and that's the conscious is like this like really slow moving machine. And you have this really fast subconscious brain. So it takes some time too, which goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of just being really kind with ourselves helps create shifts and transformation.
You are so gifted in just storytelling and connecting the dots for parents. So I thank you so much. And this has been such an incredible conversation. So we asked this question to all of our guests. Who is someone in your life that has kindled your love of learning, motivation, curiosity, or excellence?
I think I'd have to go with Viktor Frankl. I find a lot of inspiration from authors. And when I read Man's Search for Meaning, my brain just blew up. It just is so amazing to see an example of someone who could take something so difficult. He was in a concentration camp and just saw things so incredibly different than everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people, and just very, very, very inspiring. So he did all of them: learning, motivation, curiosity, excellence. He captures all of those for me.
I love that. He's one of my favorite people too.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Andee, for coming on the KindlED Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was so fun to talk about my favorite thing, kids and connection.
Yeah. How can people learn more from you? Where can they find your book and follow your work or anything else like that?
Yeah. So my book's on Amazon. It's called Connect Method Parenting. So you can get it on Amazon or Audible or any place they sell audiobooks. And then my website is connectmethodparenting.com, and I have free resources on there. And links to Instagram and Facebook are all on the website. So you can go check it all out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
Before we go, please don't forget to subscribe to KindlED wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a review, rate us, or share your favorite episode on social media and tag us at PrendaLearn. For more Kindled content, head on over to prenda.com/kindled and subscribe to the Kindled newsletter.
Remember to submit your questions, challenges, or Spark Squad nominations to us at podcast@prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to keep kindling.